Okay, hello, welcome everybody. December 7th to our Jump Around Weekly podcast. So excited again this Monday. We're bringing you another wonderful guest, UW former wrestler, current businessman, and all around great guy, Mr. Pat Christenson. Thanks so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
Good to be with you guys.
Yeah, awesome to have you. Pat's out in Las Vegas now, been out there a long, long time, running events and doing wonderful things for a bunch of different sports. But first, real quick, Pat, I want to get into something. I wanted to have you on a long, long time ago. I think our first guest of the show may have been Coach Clevin. And, Coach Clevin talked highly of you and talked about his experience. So what I'd like, we love Coach Clevin here and think he's wonderful. And I think he's a coach I would have loved to wrestle for. Can you explain to us a little bit about your experience with Coach Clevin and what he did for you when you were competing?
You have to go back to, I wrestled at Oak Creek High School. And when I think I was a freshman, but my brother wrestled the Racine Park schools. I think Dwayne was there maybe 3 years, and he won 2 state championships. And 1 year he had 3 state champs. I mean, that wasn't a wrestling that wasn't Mineral Point. It wasn't Stoughton. And I don't think they've ever repeated it. So Dwayne proved early on that he had a knack for coaching wrestling. Fortunately, they hired him at Wisconsin. He was intuitive enough to know what he needed, and that was Russ Hellickson. He knew what he needed in terms of an assistant, and fortunately, they went to the same high school, 20 miles from Madison there, the two of them. But better than that, we weren't even at the time. Wisconsin wasn't even wrestling Iowa. I don't think they were wrestling both Michigan schools. They had mostly a state schedule, so the expectations were really low. So he changed the schedule, just changed the whole standard and the expectations. So the slew of Wisconsin NCAA wrestling champions, if it weren't for those two, it's hard to see where 4 or 5 of us, how we'd ever have won titles.
1976 national championship run. I believe you were unseeded heading into the national tournament, correct?
What's interesting about that year is I had beat all of the seeded wrestlers. I beat Carr, I beat Wagaman, Powell from Iowa State, Zilberberg I beat, but I also lost to him, except for Joe Carr. The way I heard it when Coach came to my room the night before was Gable got locked in an elevator. He was our seating meeting. He was our representative for the Big Ten. So Rhinewan ended up 6th seed. Both of us were on the East-West All-Star team. And but fortunately, the guy that I had first was the guy I wrestled out in the World Camp. And I was pretty confident I was going to get the 2nd seed. So he was 2nd seed, so I beat him the first round. But my senior year, I only had 1 loss going into the Iowa State duels. Lost both of those on the road, then lost to Zilberberg in the Big Tens. So I had a total of 4 losses.
And you were unseeded just with 4 losses.
Well, 4 losses, and they were one was to tour to Zilberberg, one was to Wagaman, one was to Dave Powell.
Wow. So which Zilberberg was that?
Dan.
So Dan Zilberberg
Larry.
Larry Zilberberg.
Dan Zilberberg has a son named Luke, right? Luke wrestled for John and I at South Dakota State and was an All-American for us.
I had some great times with Dan and Pete Galea at the Michigan wrestling camp 3 years in a row.
Dr. Dan Zilberberg, he's a veterinarian in Minnesota.
Being unseated was kind of it wasn't like I snuck up on people.
Right. You were the bad draw, that's for sure, huh?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Turned out to be.
Right. Awesome. So let's change gears a little bit. You're out in Las Vegas right now. You've been there for years. And you're kind of in charge of bringing NCAA championships to Las Vegas. I know you got a couple of this year. How close are we to possibly, and I don't know what you can talk about, getting the National Wrestling Championship to Las Vegas?
Well, we bid on it this year, and unfortunately we didn't get it. So it's going to be at least 3-4 years away. It was kind of, I've been chasing this since we opened Thomas and Mack in 1983, but it hasn't been west of the Mississippi since I won it in 1976. So,
and where was that?
Tucson.
Wow.
Obviously, the Midwest and the East is the hotbed for wrestling, and I'm guessing it's about the travel and. But I think Vegas, we've done the World Wrestling Championships here. We do the U.S. Open. We do the Cliff Keen, the Las Vegas Invitational. That's 39 years old. Yeah, it was, we ended up getting hockey. We ended up getting a regional basketball. But I was disappointed we didn't get wrestling.
Well, keep getting after it. I know as a wrestling coach, personally, I would love for it to be in Vegas. We go out there once or twice a year for wrestling events, and our whole national championship, I feel, is are the fans, right? That's what makes our event so special, are the fans. And I think going to Vegas is just so much for the fans to do, and it'd be wonderful if we ever could get it out there.
Yeah, again, I'm hopeful.
Good.
Yeah. Well, good. Before we change gears, Pat, I had one quick question about that NCAA run. I did talk to Coach Clevin a little bit about that NCAA championship run, and he told me to ask you about your semifinal match against Joe Carr, and specifically about the last 5 seconds.
So when I was a high school senior, I didn't place in the state tournament my senior year. I didn't place at all. So I walked on at Wisconsin, but that summer I wrestled then it was called the USWF Nationals. And I got to the finals. And guess who I'm wrestling? Joe Carr. So I lost to Carr the first time, 6-2. He wins it. Then junior year in the Midlands, we wrestle in that year. They had Desick, Chalice, Zilverberg, Carl Adams. It was Olympic year. And Joe and I ended up in consolation match. He beat me 6-6 ref's decision.
Wow.
My senior year, we're in consolation again, going for third and fourth. I beat him 6-6 ref's decision. So now we're in the semifinals of the NCAA tournament. He takes me to my back right off the bat with the same move I took him to his back with in the Midlands. It was almost like he was waiting for it. And then he took me down again. So before I even knew it hit me, I was down, I think 6-1. And we were scrapping back and forth. I got a couple of stalling points on him. So in the last 5 seconds, he was that close to getting another 2-pointer, which would have got us into overtime. And I kept hearing his brother in the corner, Fletcher was the coach. He's going, shoot. And he was dog tired. I mean, he was worn out. Fortunately, when he shot, he stuck his head up, and I headlocked him and put him on his back, beat him. So again, it was my tournament. It was just everything went my way.
That's awesome. Well, good. Now, this is something I'm really excited to talk about, and I know you've got a lot of passion about a lot of the legends of this sport. Etched in stone, stories of wrestling legends. Where did it come from? Kind of talk about what you've been working on lately and where you look for the future of this.
So I was asked to be on the National Wrestling Hall of Fame board about a year and a half ago. It was the first time I've been to Stillwater, and the first time I've been through the Hall of Fame, through the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. As I went through it was really a great building, exhibition of all of wrestling. And I knew enough about a lot of these guys to know there's a whole lot more behind these guys than just what you're seeing on these walls. So we produced the National Finals Rodeo. In the last year and a half, we started producing our own podcast. And so I kind of understood what it would take, even though the series, the way I envisioned Etched in Stone, would have been a whole lot more structured. So I pitched it to the Hall of Fame board about a year ago. The concept is to do kind of a for 30 without having to do video. There aren't a lot of stories about the legends of wrestling. I mean, yeah, Dan Gable, maybe there's a handful that you really get some good stories on. So the concept behind Etched in Stone would be to tell those stories in a very equitable way, meaning the cost of the process that I envision would be no more than $10,000 per distinguished member. That would be all of the interviews, hiring somebody to write. It would be all the scripting. It'd be the editing, all the sound, and we produce a storybook. Torella's storybook, who is Torella's we've already had 3 episodes on Mark Torella. Lee Kemp is next, but the storybook is 32 pages with it's digital, so it not only has pictures, it has video. So in Kemp's in Kemp's storybook, there is a Gable's match is in there. The match that he had with the Russian in high school is in there. A match with Kelly Ward is in there. So it is a very unique way, one for wrestling fans, wrestlers, to hear about these legends. And probably the most unique thing about it is that it's wrestlers telling stories about wrestlers. So I'm doing, I picked Mark and Lee for 2 good reasons. One, I coached with Mark at UNLV for 3 years. And obviously I wrestled with Lee and have known Lee a long time. So I knew enough about them to ask the right questions and then put a script together and a podcast that would be entertaining, insightful. So it wasn't just an interview with Lee and Mark. There's 10 to 12 people I interviewed that are in the podcast, friends, coaches. In fact, if you look at Lee's, which is coming up, there's a couple pieces in there about how Hellickson and Dwayne. So they're all part of the story. So I think what is unique about Etched in Stone that people will appreciate, especially Wisconsin fans, we've got 2 there. We got Lee, and then we have Russ Hellickson. Eventually, we'll do Russ also. But it's interesting perspective. It's very story oriented. It's meant to be entertaining, but yet it's wrestlers especially, and wrestling fans will appreciate it.
That's great. That's fantastic. I'm excited to hear that. What is your plan after Lee and Mark? You said you got Russ. How many distinguished members are there, just so the fans know?
179.
179.
So the first season is Mark, Lee, Dan Gable, Pat Smith, John Smith, and the Smith family. So we're trying to do a six distinguished members a season. Most of them, both of the Mark and Lee's were 3 episodes apiece. So each week you launch a different episode. So Mark's just finished. Lee's will launch this week, and his will go 3 weeks. And then you have Gable for 2 weeks. And then I'm not quite sure how many, the Smiths will be at least 2 episodes per. So we'll finish up the first season in early February.
That's great. The fans are going to love it. I know that for sure. Well, Jess, what do you got for us as far as fan questions?
Yeah, we've got some great questions, actually. You are president of Las Vegas Events and just a huge business leader in the Las Vegas community. What lessons did you take from wrestling throughout your career, both as a wrestler and then later as a coach? And how is that, how have you worked that into your business leadership and life lessons there?
If it weren't for wrestling, I wouldn't be here. The coach, UNLV, started a wrestling program in 78, I believe it was. No, actually it was earlier than that. It was 76 because the coach was in Tucson and saw me win the title. So from 77, while I coached 3 years at Wanakee, the wrestling program at Wanakee. and he was recruiting me to come out, but I wasn't ready until 80, and I was all set to go to LSU. Um, I don't know if you remember Larry Shakatano was the coach at LSU. I was all set to go, and a job came open as event coordinator for athletics and the wrestling coach. That's how I ended up in Vegas. And the job as event coordinator kind of led to my job with Thomas Mack Center when they dropped wrestling. So there's fate in itself. But I think the biggest thing that I took away from wrestling is preparation. And I'm actually a whole lot better at preparing and work whole lot harder at preparing for my job than I did wrestling. You had guys like Jimmy Haynes and Jack Ryan, Lee Kemp, who were, I don't know that I know anybody that prepared as well as those guys did. I wasn't that kind of wrestler. I worked hard, but I probably read more and prepare more for what's going on next year, the year after. So I think if anything, it is a very, very competitive person. But to me, a key in what I do is to learn everything about how you do the job. And that's not just, who was in events, it's leadership, it's management, it's marketing, it's a whole slew of things. So, but I think that's what you learn from wrestling. Wrestling teaches you are on your own. Everything you do to prepare there's only one guy you can blame, and that's the guy you're looking at in the mirror. So I think if anything, anybody that's wrestled understands that's the character it builds I'll go back to Lee and Mark's stories. When I look at the amount of preparation these guys did and what they had to do, it is no wonder I only won one title, because there was a whole lot bigger commitment by those, especially these guys that are in the Hall of Fame.
For you, for this podcast, this is just my own question, but you've talked a lot about all the preparation. This is a new experience for you and with the Hall of Fame. How are you enjoying this new project and getting to learn and tell these stories?
I love new challenges. 3 years ago, I wrote a book on the evolution of live music in Vegas. That took me about 3 years. I think what I enjoy the most is the result of all of this is going to be an incredible amount of history being archived and fans learning about it. But it's this process that was necessary in order for this to work. So it isn't just about doing Kemp and Gable, or Kemp and Torella. It's not even about the first 6 we're doing. It's about setting up a system that you can find writers or wrestlers that are able to do this and link them with editors and magazine designers. So it's this whole system. So while I was producing Lee's and Mark's, I was also setting up this system for Etched in Stone, so that maybe after season 2, the Hall of Fame just takes this over, and it is something that grows. So I tell you, the other thing I've really enjoyed is I really enjoyed producing Mark and Lee. And if there is anyone out there that is a writer, knows somebody from the Hall of Fame, that's it. I mean, if let's say you're a wrestling writer or you were a wrestler, the guy that's doing the Smiths is a guy named Ryan Warner, who's got his own podcast, Wrestling Changed My Life. We didn't even know each other existed when I started, but he had done Gables. He'd done it's very, very similar to what I was doing with Gable. So we hooked up, and he was a fanatic about John Smith. I mean, he wanted, in fact, he said, listen, I'll do it for nothing. And he says, he just wanted to do it. So that worked out great. So he's doing all of the scripting, he's producing it. That's the idea, and that's why Etched in Stone will work. It's wrestlers telling stories about wrestlers, but there's a template being laid for the quality, for the brand, Yeah, that's probably what's most rewarding is learning more about Lee and Mark, but setting up this system, this process, so that we can get all of our distinguished members archived, get their stories archived, and so wrestling fans can hear them and read about them.
Ryan does an unbelievable job. I've already seen he's put bits and pieces out there about the Smiths. That one, it looks very, very good. And I've done one with Ryan, interviewed me once, and I think he's done John.
Yep.
He does a great job. I enjoy that guy immensely, and I think he's a very, very professional at what he does.
He does the, for the most part, he does the interactive, which when I look at the podcasts in wrestling, to me, his are probably the most valuable because they get to, you interview someone in depth. The Gable podcast, if you've listened to that, it's completely different. He did it very similar to how I'm doing Mark and Lee's.
Pat, let's real quick. You've done a lot of things, seen a lot of things, been around a lot of events. Can you put your favorite on? Can you favorite one, maybe two things that you've really have enjoyed in Vegas? Whether it's a concert, an event, what's kind of your Hall of Fame couple of moments out in Vegas with events and things like that?
You're gonna laugh at this. The Grateful Dead.
Yeah. Oh.
All right.
But the first year, it was in 1990, we sold out 2 shows, 30,000. We had Santana. The second year, we sold out 3 shows, and we upped it, so we were at 35,000. The last year, we did 40,000 a show. So we did 5 straight years of it, and for our bottom line, it was like $2 million a year. But just keeping the Grateful Dead there, and we had Steve Miller that played with them, Dave Matthews, Santana, Sting. So again, I'm a music guy, but for 18 years when I ran Thomas and Mack, I didn't get to enjoy a lot of music. But just like I'm doing with Etched in Stone, I really enjoyed pulling it off. I really enjoyed doing all the different events.
Awesome. All right, Pat. Well, we really appreciate your time, man. I know in here, Madison, in our wrestling program, your name is on our wall, and you're a legend here. And I know all the work you're doing in Vegas is just unbelievable. We're out there a lot at the, sometimes at Cliff Keen, sometimes the U.S. Open. I see you running around. I can't thank you enough for what you do for wrestling in general. I'm so glad you're a Badger, and I'm glad you're getting this project Etched in Stone off the ground. And I look forward to listening to every podcast. So again, thank you so much for being on, and I look forward to crossing paths with you at some time in the near future.
Guys, I really like what you guys are doing too. I think you're heading in the right direction. You're putting it together the way it needs to be put together. You had some good, you had a great recruiting class. So I can't wait till we get this COVID over, so I can come in and watch a couple matches. So now, good luck to you guys too.
Thank you, Pat. That's awesome. So as always, everybody, thanks for tuning in. Start your week off right and jump around.